Interview with Frances J. Lance, Frances J. Lance, Lance, 219 Cadgewith, Cadgewith East, Lansing, Michigan 48906, phone 517-482-5609, at 4000 North Rend River, the GM Employee Development Center, Lansing, Michigan, on Monday, August the 27th, 1990, at 1:30 in the afternoon. Okay, Frances, you tell me who you are and we'll get started.
Frances J. Lance, address 219 Cadgewith-East, Lansing, Michigan 48906. Telephone number 482-5609.
Great. Frances, when did you hire in at Oldsmobile?
I hired in April of 1945.
Okay, what department?
When I hired in, I worked in the time department. That was in building 28.
First floor?
No, it was on the second floor.
Second floor. What's your supervisor?
And my supervisor was Charlie Earley. So in a short time, I was transferred into rate audit and worked for Raleigh Crane.
Okay, let's see, what did you do when you were in the time department?
When I was in the time department, I wrote time from the cards that were taken from the clocks, from the time card racks.
Okay, now this was hourly.
That's right, it was hourly.
Okay.
And I figured the time.
So you had a form that you put the time down manually from these cards?
That's right, and you had to balance at the end of each week.
You see, so you would take these cards that somebody apparently would pick them up out of the time
Right,
clock.
the timekeepers would pick them up.
Timekeepers, and then bring them to you. When would you get them? The first thing each morning, or at night, or?
We get them in the morning.
In the morning. And then this form, you'd have to put would you record the man's social security number, or did each person have
They each had a clock number. And we associated the clock number and the clock number with the man.
Okay, did each person have a form for himself, or did you run them chronologically on
a sheet? Yes.
By clock number?
By clock number. Mm-hmm.
And what about, you kept track of overtime too?
Overtime too.
And once a week you balance?
At the end of the week, it had to balance.
Okay. How long did it take you to post, say, one day's cards? How many hours?
It would depend on how many people worked in that department, but so usually 30.
What department?
Yeah, but I had several departments. I don't remember really the clock numbers. I don't remember what they started with anymore. I don't remember that.
Posting.
That's right.
Did you do that by pencil?
We did it by pencil.
By pencil. Okay. And then once a week
they had to balance. I'm not sure what they balanced with. Evidently, the number of hours they worked, their regular hours plus overtime hours.
Okay. Now, do you remember what the rates were then for different jobs, maybe just one or two different jobs?
I know it wasn't very much. It was probably around, I think, about 60 cents an hour.
Okay, for the straight time.
Right.
Did you have a lot of overtime?
No, that was at the close of the war, so they were closing up the books really and getting ready for, well, they had a strike. So they had
Strike, see, that was
in 45, wasn't it? Right. And I hired in April, and that fall they had a strike.
Okay.
So then I stayed at home, took care of my children.
To come back to the factory to win.
Before they had the strike, I was transferred to Raleigh Cranes Department.
Now, what did he do?
Rate audit.
Audit.
That's right.
Audit.
I did mostly filing.
Okay.
They only had just a few girls that worked in there. Bernice Waltz and Nan, well, it's Nan Broadbent now.
Okay. What area was that in? What building?
It was in building, the administration building, wasn't that 60?
Yes, that was 60.
On the third floor.
In the south wing?
South wing. Mm-hmm.
That's where Lee Crane's area was.
That's right. Then they moved from there into building 36. No, 36 was on Olds Avenue, wasn't it? 34 was back in.
I think you're
So they moved to 34 on the main floor. And
all of audit.
all of hourly payroll.
All of ours.
See, we were all salaried, but we worked for hourly payroll. We kept hourly payroll.
Well, Francis, then Crane would report to Charlie Earley.
That's right. He'd be our Charlie Earley. Before Charlie Earley, there was Harold Blow. Before Harold Blow, I don't remember that man's name anymore,
That's all right.
but Harold Blow.
What kind of a man was Harold Blow?
He was a real nice supervisor. Very nice. Got along fine with him. Let's see, there was Harold Blow, and then Mark Powers, and then Charlie Earley.
Okay, did you?
I worked for all of them because I worked in that department for 17 years. And then they asked me if I'd take Joe Davis's place. She was, I don't know if she passed away yet, or I know she was retired.
No,
So they wanted to know if I wanted her job.
she was at that time supervisor, circularizing.
That's right. Right.
Well, let's get back to your jump in hourly payroll first. You worked for Mark Powers too.
Right.
What kind of a man was he to work with?
He was very good. In fact, I liked all my supervisors. They were always very fair. Really more than fair.
Charlie Earley.
Charlie Earley was too. Real good friend.
Were you working for him when this first ED, like we know EDS now, this computerized thing of?
It was just coming in, just beginning to come in, because one of the men that worked in the office was Dick Wolverton. And he had this whole stack of papers, and I had the bond department. And bonds, U.S. bonds. And he brought this big stack of papers in, and along with payroll, because I was helping George Trescott with the payroll. We'd meet people at the window, and they would sign and pick up their checks. If they didn't, if they sent someone else, that person they sent had to have a written, had to have written permission for whomever the check was for. And so anyway, this big stack of papers was there, and you had to compare. And of course, it was all new. So I asked Dick what I should do with it, and he said, "Well, you'll figure it out, okay." And finally, I did. I don't know how I did it. They were like they were tabulated, but they were tabulated with IBM. They were IBM papers. And they had a fold, see, they had a fold, and they were by departments.
And that would show the individual and his hours.
His hours and his clock number.
Similar to what you had been posting.
Yes, because I was still on payroll.
I see. So this was the computerized.
Yes,
Previously.
that you had to familiarize yourself with it. But that was fine. I got along fine with that. And then I really liked that job.
Excuse me.
Yeah,
run out of time like you had done before, didn't you? I mean, or was it, were these hours already figured out so that you knew like?
They were figured in with the amount, so you had to check a check with that. They were what they were check sheets. That's what they were.
Check.
So you had to separate them by department. Then you'd put the departments together, whatever number of sheets you had. Then when you dispersed the check, you'd look on the sheet and check it off. Then those would go to the foreman.
Oh, I see.
He would also have a list of his men with numbers on, and they had to compare, and you'd give those checks to him.
Who actually figured the number of hours times the rate of hourly rate?
That's still the timekeepers, because they always had a timekeeping department, so I'm sure that the men kept on doing it.
Okay. So your job was actually sorting and collating and making a distribution to the right department.
That's right. And then we band the checks with the list. And then they were, and also with a list from the foreman. So that was sent to him. And of course they had night shifts. They did, at one time, they had 3 shifts.
Okay, what time was that? Did you think you said 17 years payroll? When they were running 3 shifts? So
See, yeah, they were running 3 shifts in the plant.
yeah, 1955, 56.
It probably was about 55, I would think.
That was a high production year.
I think so. I think it was 55.
So what year was it then you were asked to move into circularizing?
Let me see, 45, 55, 65, must have been 62, because I was in 45, 62.
Okay.
And then I went to circularizing.
Where were they located?
They were located in building 28,
Which floor?
second floor.
Second floor. Okay. How many people were in circularizing?
At that time, there was probably, I think, probably about 12, probably 30 people in printing and circularizing, because the printers would bring the material into us on tables, and we'd work from there.
And you had both men and women?
No, I had nothing to do with the men.
Okay. Who supervised the men?
I think it was Jack Ray.
Okay. Who was the overall supervisor of printing and circularizing at that time?
Pat Aiken.
Patty.
Mhm.
Okay. Was his office located over there in building 22?
Yes.
Okay. Who worked for him, do you remember?
Bill Hartley was in there, Jack Ray.
Do you remember a secretary? Did he have a secretary?
No, I don't think he did, Helen.
Well, Francis, what did you do in circularizing when you first came in 1962?
When I came in there, the girls just had tables and I had a desk, just about like this, up against some files. It wasn't a very big room, and because we didn't have any machinery in there. And as all they had was the collators, or anything that they designated on an order that they wanted done.
Okay,
It might be just stamp some papers
stamping papers.
with a rubber stamp.
But some
It might be sample or mail or, yeah,
So
yes, by hand.
the stamp on the stamp pad. and stamp
That's
the
right.
paper.
But you'd be surprised how efficient the girls could get at that. They were very efficient. The more they did, the more efficient they were.
You worked for all this then.
Well, yes, they would send an order with a number on it, and the name of the department, and give us explicit orders, what they wanted us to do.
You'd have to keep all of your people, that would require all of your people working. What kind of?
See, we might do 2 or 3 orders at one
I
time,
see. Okay.
not just one, but if there was, because there was more small orders than there was big orders.
Small.
Small order might be 25 sheets stapled. If it was 25 sheets, you'd take 2 collators and put them together. And
Now, what is
a collator is metal, and it could remind you of it collapses,
oh, I see something.
and then it
Wire frame.
frames.
Expand.
Right, like 12 frames.
Sheets.
And it would hold 12 sheets or 10 sheets or 8 sheets. Or you could take 2 and you got 24 sheets, or 3, and then you pick up these papers by hand.
Would
and-
the girls use rubber finger to do that?
They used rubber fingers, and they also used sticky, kind of a mucilage thing in a little tin. They'd put their fingers on that, and you get this stickiness, a little bit, like wax or something. And then you just pick those up, give them a little tunk, and set them down. Like if you were going to have 36 pages or 24 pages, you'd keep going right on down there and pick up your 24 pages, give them a little shake, lay them down, and then you'd alternate them, put one set down and the next set up, and like that. And you had to know what you were doing then. If you had 150 sets, if you didn't get them just right, they would fall over one way or another. So you had to have them straight. Had to be stacked just right.
So then, say you had 24 pages, would one person work on just one job only?
Yes, that would be big. That's enough for one person to do. They might have 150 copies to make. Really, if they only had that many, when they get done, then they go ahead, or you could give that stack to another girl if she wasn't busy, and she could staple, because that many we would staple.
Somebody stapling those by hand.
Right. Now, if it was more copies than that,
50 or more than 24.
more than 150 copies, not pages, but copies. If it was more pages than that, if it was more than 24 pages, say it was 200 pages, then you just keep picking up, and some other girl would be picking up, like you'd have from 1 to 50. Another girl would be doing 51 to 70. And she'd be jogging hers, and you'd be jogging yours, and you get up to 150. Then you'd put those together and pick them up, put them together, and it would be too many to staple. If the department wanted them put in covers and backs, we put them on.
But no,
Or otherwise, we'd band them
no.
and put them in a box.
Each set.
Right.
I see. Well, now, if they were put in covers, would they be punched?
Well, most of the covers that they had were already punched, but on occasion we have punched them.
Previously have been run on punch paper, wouldn't it? If you're going to put them in.
Yes, that's right. Would all be run. That's right. Just what they wanted. That's right. And then the department was charged by the number of pieces that was in that booklet, even to the pins that were in it. 3 pins would have to go in it. And we usually put a washer on. But all the pages, single pages, if they were printed front and back, we just counted it 1 page, plus the finished cover and back, and the 3 pins that went in it.
Pins were those things that spread apart.
Yes.
washers on it.
They had that kind of a pin, Helen, and they also had a pin with two parts that screwed together. You'd put one from the back and one from the front, and they'd be really heavy covers. Very heavy, all, made somewhere else than Oldsmobile.
I see. Well, now, so these work orders were quite critical because
They were.
aren't really able to spell out just what they needed.
That's right, and if they didn't do it just the way it was supposed to be done, and they're saying, why didn't you this or that, so all we gotta do is get the order, because we had them all filed.
Tell you. So that's why.
So we wouldn't do it, see? That's right.
For instance, suppose you over, say, because it hadn't been, your instructions hadn't been clear, then that still charged back to the department.
Charge them again, because it wasn't, we didn't have the correct instructions.
So then the order should tell you what weight paper, whether it was punched or not, and whether it was to be printed back to back,
Right,
and what type of cover, if it was going to have a cover.
that's right. And it may have dividers in it.
Yeah, so you had to make the dividers too. There's a lot of handwork.
A lot of handwork. There was a lot of handwork, a lot of it.
How would you make dividers?
Of course, they all came done, and they'd come in the different positions. They're all positions, see? And then we would have to type on the tab,
I see, so that was.
or we could put a little paper in another little plastic tab on there with and slide this little paper in. They came all folded or punched, just all we had to do is fold them, tear them off. But we'd put that whole roll in the typewriter and type what we wanted on there and just tear them apart.
A lot of handwork.
Yeah, there was a lot to assemble before you got to the nitty-gritty of putting the booklet together.
Yes. Well, Francis, I have thought there days. Well, it'll come
Yeah.
back to me. So, do you remember the names of any of the girls that you supervised when you were doing so much of this handwork?
Ooh, let's see if I can remember. Well, that wouldn't be too long to remember because it was at the time that I went over to Building 28. So one of the girls' names was Marion Dyke. That's her name now. I don't know what it was then. I forgot.
Marion Dyke.
Barbara Wickham. Belva Corey. Hyla Baxter. Let's see, what else?
Well, some more names may come.
I can't think of any right now.
What would happen if the department sends it word and they've got to have it by, say, the 15th of the month, and here it is the 12th.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to put overtime.
Got priority. It would have priority, but we didn't. Well, they used to work a lot of Saturdays then when we were in Building 28. Because I remember we used to work in the morning and get out at 11:30. We'd start at 7. Get out at 11:30 and go play golf and forgot that you'd even work that morning. So I know we worked a lot of Saturdays.
When did you to Building 60? When the balance of the people in the building?
Let me see.
70.
Oh, Building 70.
60. Did you before you
Well, see, yes, we moved to 60, then we went out to 34. That was all hourly payroll. And hourly payroll moved from 34 into 36. That was on Olds Avenue. When we were in 34, Helen, we had files and files of rate slips that had to be sorted because they were so busy. They didn't have time to sort them during the war. So it was saved from those years. So when they came back from strike, we were out in building 34. Is that 32 out back in the plant? 34, I think, 36 was on the street, wasn't it? I think that was 34. Anyway, when we came back, they said, don't go through the gate if they say that you cannot. Don't come in, just go on back home. I think it was like March or April. So we didn't, and they didn't, they didn't say anything, so we went on through the gate. And we kept on going, and they let us, and we worked. And that was a lot of what had to be done, was catch up all these things that had been left. So we did a lot of that kind of work when we went back. And we worked there for a while. Then we moved to 36 on the main floor.
Oh, that's Charlie.
Charlie Earley. Yeah, Charlie Earley was my supervisor then.
So that finished up your 17 years in that area.
Yes.
28.
Right. That's right.
Then Circularizing. 28, you moved to building 60. Remember what year?
Just a minute. No, Helen. When I left when Circularizing moved. You mean when they moved? I can't tell you that.
That's okay.
We moved from there into building 70 after it was completed. And we worked in the basement on the, I think it was west end. I think, you know how it is in the basement. You don't know. But I'm sure it was the west end. And printing work there and a dressograph. And they also had the stock room for the paper.
Stores S.
Stores S.
Well, now, Francis, was somebody head of a dressograph and somebody had a printing, and you were heading up Circularizing, and Pat Aiken was still
Right.
Supervising.
Right.
Okay.
Pat and Bill Hartley.
Bill Hartley.
And then, of course, Jack Ray was kind of the overseer in printing, along with Bill and Pat. And then, see, there, when you came down into the office, came down to our level, first of all was Sally Bennett, and her last name was Frank. Rosemary Frank. And then in back of them was the print shop. And then you went to the left in the print shop and you came to a dressograph. And then we went through a dressograph and Circularizing was there. And then back of where we worked, girls did engineering, collated engineering.
Oh, there was an engineering group in there?
Yes. They were listed in our department, but they did engineering collating, like you do for any department.
Okay, that's all they did.
That was all they did. If they got where they weren't busy, then I'd always give them something to do.
Well, he's a secretary.
I don't know, Helen. I don't know why they did that.
Is it confidential?
Probably. I think so. I think that was it. And let me see, there was Elaine Thompson and Hyla Baxter and Ethel Treglone. And then when some of my the girls in our department were busy, they'd help those girls too. They'd help. So we were always busy.
I could imagine.
Yeah.
Well, Francis, that must have been in, you said 1962, when you
when I went to a dressograph,
or
to Circularizing.
Now, when you moved to 70, was that in 1966 or 67? That's when most of us went in building 70.
See, I worked, oh, I don't, see, I worked 12 years altogether in Coley, in Circularizing. I worked there 12 years and 17 in, right,
So, and you retired at when?
74.
So when you got over to building 60, or 70, then I recall, you handled the press kit mailings for public relations.
Right.
too.
That's right.
Okay, how did you do that? I mean, you would get the order, of course, but tell me about the
Well, then
procedure involved.
it would tell us, you know, what, or you would send a sample to us. Public relations would send us a sample, what they wanted made.
What would the sample be like, for instance?
And a sample might be probably 3 different cars, 3 different photographs, maybe with a front photograph or something along with it to give the customer an idea what it was going to look like. And it would have printed material.
Stories?
A story.
Story.
Sometimes it would be maybe 1 story, 2 pages. No.
So you just made up these press kits of photographs. Was there another type of press kit? Was there,
Yes, we used to put out another type that had a mat.
now what is a mat?
A mat looked like a stamped piece of thin white cardboard. And it would.
We're working on press kit, mat kit.
A mat kit, and the mat looked, it had pressed into the mat, like the picture of the car. And,
Would it have
or,
like a caption or something? Tell what the car was?
I don't remember that.
Well, would there be
There was some printed material with it that would tell what the car was, little proofs. Right.
you put it in a kit? They
Oh,
kit.
probably about, I think 1 of each car.
Okay, so if we have
About 4, 6.
different cars here, there would be 4 mats and 4 proofs.
That's right.
Wasn't that kind of hard to keep the proofs?
You had to keep them banded or separated somehow, because they all came together. Yes, and they were kind of compact because it was cardboard pressed. They were compact and they kind of fit in each other a little bit. But when you get them all spread out on a table and you're picking up and adding your captions and so forth to it, you had to be sure when you picked what was ever left on the tables, they all had to match. They had to be with the right car.
See, so your Delta 88, for instance, Matt had to have its Delta 88 proof.
That's right.
Now, would those 2 pieces be banded together?
Yes. Yeah.
So then you would have really 8 pieces with 4 rubber bands put in 1 kit.
That's right.
With a story.
Right. I know there
And
was a
this kit
story.
had a folder, too.
Yes, we'd put it in a folder. Mm-hmm.
To the model year.
Yes.
Okay. Well then, Francis, now that those undoubtedly would go to newspapers, like the photographic kit you described. But didn't they have any information going to radio stations or television stations?
Yes, we used to do that
You had
too.
another kit then?
A kit for, I think they call it press or.
Stained press kit, but it would be different than the photographic kit or the mat kit.
Right.
Different story in there.
That's right.
I see. So that was kind of a job to keep.
There was a lot of work when that time of the year came to keep them correct.
Would you have a deadline on mailing too?
Yes, because some of that material would be dated, some of the letters. Mm-hmm. Right. That's right. You had to have it so it'd be there. Right. On or before. Right.
How did you put the captions on the photographs?
We used to put the captions on the photographs with little round circles that had, that had glue on the back. But we took them off a piece of wax paper.
You took the little sticky thing off.
So and then all you had to do was just put it over the pieces. We only used one sticker.
So you pick up a photograph, and then you'd have to pick up the right caption, probably center it on the photograph.
Right.
Put the sticky circle over
to hold it
together.
Right. Then we'd put it with the rest of the material so that whatever we had to pick up to put with that and band it, then it would be all ready to put into a folder.
You mentioned a dressograph. How did that work in the mailing of this type? They do labels for mailing?
They used to do labels, yes.
How does that work?
Well, they have a machine that is like a typewriter, and but it's an upright machine. And then you just go, and when you punch a letter, it goes onto the tape, onto the label. And the labels are, again, they're perforated, they're on sheets. So there's a perforation there. And then if they didn't tear them apart, we would. And then they would be mailed to that mail order.
Remember how many pounds of mailing you would have for, say, an announcement mailing?
I don't know that, Helen. I don't know.
How many kits would you think that you would handle at some?
Oh, gee, I remember some of those orders. It seemed like they'd be 1,500 and some would be 2,400. And I know that our mailing list was like to the zones and the dealers. And I know at one time there was like 3,500 dealers. And
now on a zone mailing, you'd probably have a bulk mailing. You'd have a number of kits, which is sending.
Right. Yes, right to the zone office. At that time, I think there was about six or seven.
First.
Because see, then the zones, that all fell apart. I'm sure it did. I don't think they have zones anymore. Because they were in an area, there was a lot of them in the east. And that, and I would not say that happened when I was there. But I've kind of gathered that it did not continue afterward. I can't remember some of the name of the zones anymore. Newark?
Well, Francis, then Pat Aiken, didn't he retire?
He retired, Bill Hartley. I'm sure that Pat Aiken retired just after I did.
Oh, after.
Just after.
74.
Mm-hmm. And then I know Bill retired, and of course he's been dead now for 4 or 5 years. And Pat Aiken has been gone longer than that.
What kind of a man was Pat Aiken?
Well, I tell you, I just really I knew before I went into that department that it wasn't going to be exactly what I wanted, but I was thinking about retirement myself because I wanted something kind of decent. And, but he was an awful drinker. He'd come to work in the morning and breathe down your neck when you're working, and that's all you smell was that stuff. So I didn't like that. And I guess his wife was an alcoholic too, but as far as I know, she's still alive. But he's been gone quite a while. So now I didn't really care for Pat Aiken. He wasn't nothing like the supervisors I had before. But I knew all this before I took the job. So there wasn't too much I could do about it.
Oh, no, Bill Hartley, what kind of?
He was good. He was all right. I think Bill was really in earnest about his job. I mean, if there was some work to be done, he'd get right in there and do the folding and everything. He'd just get right in there, and then the girls would hop onto it, maybe stuff envelopes by hand, or if it was a big enough order, they'd put it on the machine.
Now you mentioned folding.
They had a folder that folded letters. Yes. And it would, you could fold a letter inward, the printing inside or the printing outside, or you could make it an accordion fold where the, to address the person would be on the side you'd see first. And then they'd fold them and put them in trays. Then they had an inserter that they could put a 2-page letter into an envelope.
This automatic insert a 2-page letter.
Right, and put the postage on it. And then as they came off, you could band them right away to state or city or whatever your mailing consisted of.
Now, would that mailing list be set up according to zip code? If you're making a big mailing?
See, the mailing list would come from these plates. These plates would be put in a long drawer that would sit up like this. Then it would feed into the machine to put the addresses on that envelope.
I see. So the address was printed from already pre-created metal plates.
Right.
That were in a tray.
That's right.
Machine, but somebody by hand had to actuate each
lead. Yes. Well, no, it would go in the machine. The letter would go into the machine and insert into an envelope.
Okay.
But that envelope already had the address on it.
So
then it would insert the letter in there and seal it and stamp it, the date, whatever the date was.
So that one machine did those 3.
Yes, right.
After the letter was folded.
That's right.
She would insert the 2-page letter and seal
and post it, right. And then whoever was helping on the machine would band them to city or state or whatever the mailing consisted of. Then, see, we had the big collator that Belva ran. It had, I think it had 12 stations on it, and it collated the papers with a suction cup. Would pick the paper up and carry it on down, and when you got down to the bottom, see, you'd have like from page 1 to 12. But so it would pick 12 up first. You put 12 here. So then these other, you just keep stacking up until you had page 1 on top, and then you had a complete set. And it would, all by itself, it would go into another little trough, and it had a thing that would come down to make them an even pile up, an even pile. So in each one of those piles, you had 12 sheets. So then the operator would take, when she got a certain stack on there, would take it off and set it over, and the machine kept right on going.
Now, so it must have been flat affair with
It was like a long table.
sections for each page, like
That's,
pages that have 12 sections.
that's right, Helen.
So 16 pages, could you set it for 16 pages to pick up?
No, because it's only got so many
I
stations.
see, so 12 stations. Then you're
I picked 12 because I'm sure that's all the stations it had.
this automatic arm could be actuated and the air would pick the page.
Yeah, little suction cups.
So,
But then if you had more than 12 pages to the order, then you just start all over again with 13 and to 24 and just keep going until you had your order complete for whatever number of copies. But they did, see, that was one of their later machines, that collator.
that was quite a time saver. Well, because prior to that, you would have had to, what, girls walk around the
Yeah,
table?
right. You had to lay all these pages out and they had to, but they were a lot of clever girls at that. I mean, like I say, the more they did, the more efficient they were. And, well, just like when we made up the kits for public relation, we would, put quite a few girls together on some long tables and they'd pick up what was on their table, and then this next would do the same, then you combine them.
Well, what about the photographs, Francis? Were they ever able to collate photographs if you were saying?
Yes. Yes, they did.
Automatic sheet?
Yes, they would. Not very well because they had a polish, a shine.
Yes.
But we've done it. We put them on there.
Well, later, did the caption become part of the photograph? Well, was that printed right in the photo, or were you, when you left, were they still affixing captions on the photo?
No, I think they were beginning to print that, make it a part of the photograph. But no, those photographs weren't printed in our offices, were they? No, they had to be shipped in, right? And they came in with the caption on, right? I remember that was just coming in. A lot of work. Yes, it did.
Francis, did you do anything with like PDM manuals that come from the service department that would have parts department manuals?
See, I know. I wanted to ask you, didn't Bill used to make up a catalog, not every year, but every few years, a big, thick alphabetical catalog of parts?
Yes, that came from the parts department.
Right,
That was printed on both sides.
right.
And a lot.
Real fine printing.
Yes.
We did that too.
You put that together after
Mhm.
printing it.
Uh-huh. And it was thick, see, so we had to use that funny screw that went in from the bottom and from the top and joined.
Yes.
Right, and those covers they were shipped in because they were probably a quarter of an inch thick. But I know that it wasn't done every year, but it was done maybe every 3.
Updated, yes.
Mhm.
Well, did you work a lot of overtime?
No.
Did you get time?
I didn't, but some did, but I didn't.
Did you sometimes get in extra help to work in the circularizing? Did you had a rush job?
On occasion maybe, but not too often. Not too often.
There were still about 30 girls in circularizing toward the end when you were leaving.
I don't think there was that many. Maybe 25.
Maybe we should take care of.
Yeah, a lot of it.
As you got into the more automated area there, were these experienced girls hired from the outside, or would they be coming from some internal department at Olds?
most all of the girls that worked in there from the time that I took the job that I know about were from salary personnel.
I see.
They would be hired, and most of them came in there until they were absorbed somewhere in an office or in the plant or someplace. But they'd come in there and until they were absorbed. Usually we did, the regular force wasn't maybe not more than 15 girls, but the rest of them were girls that were hiring in. And like I say, I've known girls that came in there 20 years old. You'd swear they had a mind and ambition of a 40-year-old. They were really good. They knew. You didn't only have to tell them once.
Can you think of any particular?
I can't. That one girl that I think of so much, I don't know her name. I don't. But I wish I did. I can't remember. It's a long time ago. But there was a lot of good girls that came in. And some of them weren't. Some of them were lazy. One girl, I had to tell her to wash her hands. Her hands were so dirty. I told her, I said, look, you got to go wash your hands. This letter's going to somebody up, you know. I said, you got to go and wash your hands. I said, I'm ashamed to have to tell you that, but it's the truth. You better learn. Well, they finally let her go because she just didn't care. She just was that type.
Would you have evaluation sessions with those girls, those new hire girls?
I didn't have any evaluation sessions with them. One girl that came into the office was giving all of us a hard time, and she knew she was not in there permanently, or thought she wasn't. And she was a black girl, and she said she'd come up missing, and all the girls were working and, you know, busy as bees in the morning. And I'd say, where's so-and-so? And they'd say, I think she went to the restroom. Well, she'd be gone for 2 hours. Well, I found out if she wasn't in the restroom, she was out in the plant somewhere visiting. So I told her, I said, you know, when you go, some other girl has to take over where you've left off to keep the work going. And I said, you're supposed to have 15 minutes to go to the restroom, and fine. But you can't go out there and stay, because what you don't do, somebody else has to do for you. And she got kind of smart about it. And I said, well, I'll tell you, there are a lot of girls sitting on curbs out there looking for a job. And they'd be glad to have your job. So finally, I got a call from Tom Shields. He wanted me over there on a certain hour on a certain day. And I went, and she was there too. And Tom told her, he said, I want you to know that this is the first time in all years that Fran's been here that anybody has complained about her. And he said, you're going to have to shape up or forget the job. That's your choice. So she said she would, and then she came back into the office, and she was there just 2 or 3 days, and she was gone. So they may have hired her out in the plant somewhere or taken her in or someplace. I heard she was out in the plant. But not very. That was a rare occasion, because some of those girls really worked well. Some of them would kind of goof off a little, but they had to have a little expansion too. Marion Dyke, do you remember her? She's still living, not very well, but she's still alive. And I remember, see, I was with my back toward the cabinets that the girls in engineering were working in back of. And they'd get a little dead out there, and Marion went out there on occasion. I know she went out there more than once, and she'd take these collators like she was playing
an accordion.
An accordion. And let off a little steam, you know, I could hear them back there, but that wasn't too often. But she was a good worker, very good. So was Belva. Belva Corey was a good worker. She was conscientious, did real good work. And if I wanted to ask a question, when I first come in that department, she and Marge Bundenthal gave me a hard way to go because I guess they thought one or the other of them was going to get the job, which don't mean that much to me, you know. If I don't get it, I don't get it. There must be one better further on. But anyway, they used to give me a little hard time, but I could always go to Belva and ask her a question. She would always answer it. So she had heart surgery. Did you know that, Helen?
No, I didn't.
She did. And she, of course, has had arthritis for years. Real bad.
Well, Francis, you, I'm sure, in your capacity, made a number of suggestions that must have been helpful to the factory. Do you remember any certain suggestions that you?
I don't really remember. I know no, I know I made a few, but evidently they weren't that much because I don't even remember what they were.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Well, what were your offices like? Were you always where you could see outdoors?
No, never.
Never. Office where you could look outdoors.
The only office I had was when I was in payroll that I could see outdoors, but not in circularizing. Mm-mm. No. And when I went into that office, I was promised that I'd have an office of my own and a lot of stuff. I forgot all about it because I never saw it. And when I went in building 28, Helen, that was nothing over there. That desk I had was just covered with burn marks from cigarettes. It was a mess. It was terrible. It was dirty. No. They had fans. They did have fans. But that was it.
You always had pretty good equipment to work with? Or? Yeah.
Of course, when you're in circularizing, see, you have just certain equipment. That's it. That's what you worked with. Yes, it did. Yeah. Even over in building 70, all machines were moved in there. And that was, you know, it was all new. The floor was like terrazza, and it was all new down there.
Was the lighting?
The lighting was good, yes. The lighting was fine. Yeah.
So, did you remember any labor relations problems? The people that you worked with? Did you work with both hourly and salaried people, or always with?
Yes, because see, when I helped George in salary payroll or hourly payroll, that's where the people would come to pick up their check that weren't there. George Trescott. Mm-hmm. He was a good friend. I really thought a lot of George. And anyway, we'd give out these checks, but we never had to argue with anybody. I mean, no argument or no bad language. If that happens, all we had to do was leave the window and go tell Charlie or whoever my boss was, and they'd take over. Well, because some of those people that come to the window are not that, you know, especially I remember one woman used to pick up her husband's check and George, no, with a note, with a written note from him. Or a man could pick up his wife's check, but they do have to have written permission. And we keep that authorization. And, but sometimes you'd run into problems.
Pick up the check.
No, the check might not be back yet. It wouldn't be right there when they got there. Or just some little silly thing that didn't amount to anything, but they make something of it. We didn't have a lot of that, but you know, we had some. But I enjoyed it. They used to line up like they were going to the circus, you know, but it didn't bother me a bit. I enjoyed it. Yeah, so that's about all I remember about the,
Do you remember any interesting, exciting situations you were personally involved in?
it was all exciting to me, Helen. I really loved the job. I really liked it in payroll. Because see, when I got in there, when we moved over to building 36, I had the bond department as well as checks over there. And I enjoyed that. In fact, I guess each one of my girls have a picture of me at the bond filing cabinet. It was like a box like this and didn't have an upper part. I had to bring up a lid and lock it at night, but all the bonds were in there. And then, of course, that faded out. See, once the war was over, why, it didn't last too long. But people used to get aggravated. They'd come to the window and want to know what their husband was having deducted for bonds and who he had on as co-owner and all this business. So, and you can't tell any of that, you know, you just say that you don't have authority to do that. But it was all, every bit of it. They used to ask me on an interview, you know, what's the most exciting part of your job? What do you like best? And I said, well, there isn't any one part that I like better than the other. I said, I like them all. I like all of it. Charlie asked me once, he said, how's the chair to sit on? Is that okay? So,
Well, Francis, now your instructions, you didn't have to have instructions every day on what to do. You went to your
mm-mm,
job and did it after you had your initial instructions.
right.
Would there be a staff meeting every once in a while in your department among employees, or how did
No,
you get the messages if there was going to be a change? Would
well,
they come and tell you, or
he'd come and tell me. Uh-huh.
there was nothing printed?
No, no, nothing like that.
So you wouldn't know when you'd be getting another girl in the department to be coming down like a
No,
hire?
oh, once in a while he'd tell me, no, we're going to have a new girl coming in. And then he'd bring her back and introduce her. And another good worker we had, Helen, was Peggy. Her name wasn't really Peggy, but everybody called her Peggy Wheeler.
Yes.
She was a good worker, very good. Some of those girls are outstanding. Barbara Wickham wasn't. She wasn't. That girl, I don't know what was going on with her. I remember we were warned one time about going to the restroom and not to be surprised if we seen someone laying on the floor because of dope. That's what they told us. Don't be surprised if you go in there and somebody's laying on the floor. I never known of it happening. It never happened to me. I never saw anything like that.
Must have happened someplace.
It must have, because they warned us, see, right. But Barbara used to sit at her desk and she did some typing, or she'd get coffee in the morning and bring her toast and slosh that up and down on the coffee. Be at her desk, you know, and one of her boys would call, and the phone was on my desk, so I'd call Barbara. And she said, well, what do you want me to tell her? And he said, well, just tell her that I'm sick and I won't be in today. And she said, well, I can't tell her that you're sick. And anyway, she'd wind up calling his teacher, and he wouldn't go to school. And her boys would have beer parties while she's at work. And of course, her husband was kind of that way too, because she had, I don't know what kind of a savings it was. I don't know if it was the stock program or what, but she had quite a bit of money into it, or it could have even been her retirement. I think it was her retirement. And he said, well, I don't know. He said, I don't know why you want to let General Motors use your money. He said, you might better take it out of there. And she did. Then I've heard in the last years that they let her go. So now what would she do? She wouldn't have any retirement from General Motors. Just her Social Security. So I don't know whatever happened to them. I don't know, but I thought that was so lax for her to call a teacher and tell her that her son wouldn't be in, that he was sick, and lie for him.
Bad example.
So she wasn't a very good worker. She was real sloppy.
Was she let go?
Yeah, they finally let her go. Not too many girls that they've ever let go that I've ever known of, but those two. There was another girl that worked at Olds. Her name was Joe Davis. No, it wasn't Joe Davis. It was Joe something. She was a blonde, and she went to Florida and came back and said the reason for her being gone for a week or two, whatever it was because her father had died, and they found out that that was not true. They let her go. Can't remember her last name, but she was real blonde. Well, her hair was bleached.
This must have been in the early.
It was early. It was. It could have even been in the 60s, because I know it was a long time ago.
Practices seemed a little different then.
Yeah, right.
Well, Frances, do you remember how much you were making when you hired in hourly payroll?
When I hired in, I think I was making about $60 a week when I hired in.
For 40 hours.
And that was, we got paid by the week, I think, then when I first came there. But then later we got paid the 15th and last. And I think I was making, when I left there, I think I was making around 600.
600.
Maybe 5 something every 2 weeks or something. Yeah, I think that's about what it was.
Seems like Olds paid pretty well, and
They did. The benefits is what I really appreciated, you know. And of course, I appreciated the money too, because I had 3 children to raise, and I don't know what I'd ever done if I hadn't had my job at Olds. I would have had to, I don't know what I would have done, especially these kind of times.
Well, Frances, do you ever remember any executives from different departments coming down to supervise a job that they had running, or talking with a supervisor about any problems?
No, I don't believe I do, Helen.
Would they?
No, I wouldn't. Maybe I wouldn't know that anyway. They might, if they're going to say anything to a supervisor, they'd probably say it in his office. You know, because Pat Aiken did have an office there.
Now, did he review you annually on your annual history or annual review? The personnel, is that standard policy?
No. No. When I was in payroll, it was.
See, so you
Once a year
yearly
interview. Mm-hmm.
You would discuss if there were problems in your work habits or
Right.
working conditions.
That's right. If everything wasn't okay. And I remember one time, Helen, when I worked for Mr. Powers, he called me in his office, which is unusual. You know, they call you in their office. I wonder what's wrong anyway. So I went in there and he said, Fran, I don't understand this. You were off 80 hours last year. And I said, I don't either. I don't know what that would be. I didn't have any idea what it would be. Until I thought about it, I think it was the next day, I know what that was. My dad was sick. And I'd spent a lot of time. I took my vacation time plus. And every time I'd ask, everything is fine. Don't worry about a thing, he'd say. You know, you just go right ahead and go. Because my mother was alone, so I was helping her take care of him. And So I went in and told him. I said, you know, I never thought about that, but because I had permission to do it, I guess that's why I forgot, because I had no idea what the 80 hours was for. And he said, well, don't worry about it. He said, I'll fix it up. So I never heard any more about it. But I always, you know, I thanked him as well as General Motors for the time that they didn't really crank me up for. Because everything was done as nice as it could have been.
Seems like they try to work with an employee if he's got a problem to work out the
Yeah,
or
right.
something personal too.
It was personal to me because I just had the children. I didn't have a husband or anybody that I was answering to, only my job and my kids.
Frances, did Dorothy Frost, was she there when you were there?
Yes, she was.
She,
Yes.
kind of worker for Dorothy.
She was a good worker, but Helen, she had tactics that I did not go along with. Like if she wasn't busy, she'd run out in the stock room and dust the shelves. So Pat Aiken was telling the girls, if you want to get ahead like Dorothy, and you're not busy, you go out and dust the shelves. Things would get slack, you know. Well, I thought, I'm not dusting any shelves around here. I thought, what a foolish thing.
Stick to that.
Well, they didn't take too much to it, but she was right up at the window in Store's desk, dishing out the paper and talking to everybody. And of course, I really liked Dorothy, but it was a tactic she had. Or if some girl wasn't going as fast as she was, or as fast as somebody else, you wonder how she could do so much looking. She'd walk by my desk and drop a note and keep right on going, you know. So-and-so did so many pieces in such and such a time, more than so-and-so. And I didn't pay any attention to that note. Just threw it. Why should I run after some girl because she told me that? I wouldn't do it. I just threw the note away. I may have seen it myself, but you know, sometimes they go fast and sometimes they go slow. And Dorothy talked to me one time about it, and I said, you know, Dorothy, I think that being exact about your work is a lot more than speed and have half of it wrong. I was surprised she was that way. But Dorothy, the poor thing, she acted like always like she lived in a little peanut. She never comes out of hiding. Pearl wasn't that way, but Dorothy was.
Was Dorothy still working there when you left?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, because I know she retired after I left.
Now, Tom Stubble, did you work with him?
Uh-huh.
What kind of fellow was he to work with?
Well, of course, Tom was young, but he was good. I think he was a good worker. I've always thought he was a good worker. He'd do his work and bring it in, and that was it. He might talk a few minutes with the girls, but nothing, and then he'd be gone.
You had to work pretty closely with a mailing room too, didn't you?
Yes. With Harold
Harold
Farnham. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Who else worked with me?
A fella by the name of, seemed like his name was Clayton something. I can't remember his last name. I don't know. I guess I don't know that many in there. If I had anything to do, I'd always go to Harold. You know, if I had any business with him at all.
What kind of fellow was he to?
He was good. Harold was a good, nice, level-headed fella. Quiet. He wasn't rackety or didn't do a lot of loud laughing or any of that. I saw him somewhere. I can't remember where I saw him. But anyway, he still lives out on the Looking Glass where he did.
And Ted Green, did you work with him?
Uh-huh. Ted was he was a little bit emotional, but I've always blamed a lot of that onto his having one of his legs off, and he was young, but he was all right. I didn't find that much wrong with him. He'd always help you if you asked for help. That's all I cared. If I asked for help, I expected to get it, no matter where I worked. There was a girl that worked in payroll when I worked for Charlie. Um, I can't tell you her name anymore, but the girls would go to her and ask her for some information off these tabulated sheets. And she said, I can't give it to you right now. I'm using them. She wouldn't tell them. She wouldn't take the time to help. Well, they let her go too. She took a trip to Europe or somewhere and went whether they wanted her to or not. She didn't really have permission, but she went. Can't remember her name. So
You run into a lot of different
a
personalities.
lot of different personalities.
Now, Jack Ray, how was he to work with?
He was kind of egotistical fella, but I guess he was good at his work, which is important to General Motors. But I do think he was, I didn't, he was the type that I said I wouldn't want to see him in a dark alley somewhere. I just never trusted him too much, but he was a good worker, Helen. He's retired too.
Yes. Now, did you work with Doyle Fitzpatrick and Art and Chard at all?
No, but Doyle used to come into our office, and he'd visit a little, because we do some work for him, but not a lot. But he had this book for sale. He wrote the book. Yes. And I bought several and gave them to my kids, and kept one for myself too. And but outside, I didn't really see him that much.
So your work never really.
No, we're not really in with that. No, no.
What about Fred Kuhn? Was he in there?
Fred Kuhn, I know that name, but I can't remember. Was he a dark-haired fella?
Yes. But there was another darker one too, a Bill Berger.
Oh, I remember Bill Berger. He was an artist too, wasn't he? Do you know if he's still alive? Is he? Because, see, his wife worked, and I don't know, I don't think she worked in payroll. She must have. His wife must have worked in payroll. I know she did, because I remember when they were going together, they used to walk over to the park together and all this stuff. Yeah. Coon.
Buzz Bauer?
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah. Yeah, but we didn't have a lot of contact with him. And where I worked, I just didn't run around all the while. I had work to do and I stayed right there. I just never was too much for that, running from one office to another. I don't remember that name.
Well, Francis, you then actually saw the evolution from handwork
Mm-hmm.
to
the beginning of machines. Right.
Did your department ever get a job that you really couldn't handle for one reason or another and would have to send it out for printing? Did you ever do that?
I think so. The print department. Not anything that we had to do that I can remember that we couldn't do. Not that I remember. Now, it seems to me that in the back of my mind, didn't public relations finally put the kits and other things, didn't they do that somewhere else?
No, they continued to do it through Circularizing, but it had become so professional as far as the caption being part of the photograph. There were less photographs used, fewer stories in some kits. And of course, we then didn't have radio and television kits because the television stations were handled through the advertising agency on television commercial tapes,
I see.
that type of thing. So the number of kits that you used to do, and I recall one year there were 12 tons of announcement kits
Is there?
out,
Yeah,
and the postage was
I
astronomical.
bet.
It wasn't as high as it is now.
Mm-mm.
So a good many things have changed, and you've seen
Right.
change from the hand work right on to the beginning of the animated too.
That's right.
Well, can you think of anything else you'd like to talk about?
I can't think of anything else, Helen.
So we can make it a part of your file?
I don't care, really. They aren't that good, but
Yes.
I know I copied them twice and
Thank you, Francis. So we'll make,
this here is not a part of that.
we'll just add those to the file. Francis, so what we'd like to set up with you, we can't do it today because it's a little late. However, we'd like to get pictures by Roger Betcher of people that we interview. And it doesn't cost you anything. Could set the file, the appointment up for you, and then you know where Roger Betcher is located? 929 West Street. It's over there on the corner of Olds Avenue, or William Street and West.
Oh, I know.
Olds and West, that's what it is.
Okay, is that a lithographer or something in
Well, it
there?
used to be. Yeah.
Oh, is he in that building?
Yeah, he's in that, it's a one-story gray cement block.
Right. It's on the northeast corner.
And
Okay.
we could set the appointment for you. It only takes about 10 minutes of your time just to go in, and they'll know you're coming when it's convenient with you. We
Okay.
can talk about that, set up an appointment. And then they just kind of a bus shot from here on up. They take several views, and then we could let you make a decision on which one you think is a nice picture. And then we'll be glad to give you a print too.
Okay,
So
Helen, that'll be nice.
we'd have that.
Okay,
Well, when we go
That's
back
good.
in, we'll call and see when we can set an appointment that's convenient with you.
okay, Helen.
Well, here's our interview agreement, and there's our pen. I certainly appreciate your stopping in today. That's right.
Today's the 28th, isn't it?
27.
27th?
Thank you, Francis. That'll close out a lovely interview.